All right, we are live. Welcome to the Thursday morning fundamentals with Kier Franklin. That is myself. We are going live right now across YouTube, Facebook, Reinventing a Tattoo. Mainly hosted at Reinventing a Tattoo. It's a community app where you get to log on and share your thoughts and feelings and art with other like-minded individuals. And that's what we're all here to do is create some art. If this is your first time here, pretty much what I do is teach you guys the basic fundamentals of art and its relation to tattooing. And yeah, you get to join in and hang out if you choose to. You get to ask questions in the comments here, wherever you're streaming from. And that's pretty much how we do it here. We're gonna have some fun. And we've been learning this month about color theory. And today we are going to introduce our introduction to temperature. So that being said, let me just make sure that everything's all set here. I have been having some internet issues the past couple of episodes, so just bear with me and we will get that figured out, okay? As of that, we're gonna get started here. I'm just making sure that all the connection is good, that everybody can hear me. Please let me know in the comment section if you can hear me wherever you're beaming out. That way I know what's going on. And with that, let's get started, shall we? We have a lot of like a big topic today. It should be more of like a note-taking day than anything. A lot of new terms and theories going on when it comes to temperature. I've been mentioning it a little bit these past couple episodes as we've been learning color theory, because once you start talking about the color wheel and everything like that and its relation to each other color wise, you really can't miss talking about temperature as well, because it all coincides with each other. So with that, let's get started here. All right. Just going to say a quick good morning to everybody that is beaming in. Good morning to Atomic Injections. Thank you so much for watching today. So we got ourselves understanding temperature, okay? That is what our topic is going to be, or more so our term of what we're going to have here. We're really going to be focusing on the warm versus cool as our beginning intro to temperature. So of course, I take these definitions straight from Google. So this is temperature refers to the warmth or coolness of a color. A color's temperature affects the color of everything we see. And as artists, it's important to learn about it because color temperature helps us create depth, mood, and even movement. And it's become consistent throughout each of my classes that I pretty much take a term and define it or get the definition for it, and then we break down this definition. So while we're doing that, let's start right into it. So temperature, first sentence, refers to the warmth or coolness of a color. Now we all should pretty much know that that's what temperature is. Obviously, it's warmth versus cool. That's what we know as temperature. But what we may not be so in depth into is the way the color temperature affects the color of everything we see, which is that second sentence there. So we know, warm colors, and we know cold colors, warm colors being, red, orange, and cooler colors being blues and greens and all that fun stuff. But we're not too sure how, once you change your colored light source, which is, temperature, how that affects everything that you see as an artist. And that's why I love this definition, because it does state that as an artist, it's important to learn about that, because it does create its own depth, mood, and movement throughout your piece, especially if you're using color theory. So with that, once again, I'm going to go over this Hue Wheel. We have been going over this for past 3 weeks here. I call it the hue wheel because these are our different hues or colors that we see that make a rainbow. We all know what that is. And I'm going to pretty much break everything down today as if we were kindergarteners, because that's how, you know, temperature was taught to me from a professional, not so much as kindergartner, but sometimes you have to simplify stuff like you're talking to a kindergartner in order to understand the simplicities of different topics. So I did mention, you know, a couple weeks ago on our first class on, I talked about the hues, our tertiary colors, which would be, you know, red, orange, yellow, green, you know, cooler reds, which are down on the bottom here. And I said that that is a more accurate description of the way that your environment works. Okay. So whenever you're looking at something outside, you've seen the cast of light on an object, whatever that object may be. Now that light source, whatever that light source color is going to change your object to come towards that light source. And I'll explain that in a little more depth in a little bit. But the way that we're going to be thinking right now is as tertiary colors, the warm or cool of our primary colors, be it a warmer red, a cooler red, a cooler yellow, a warmer yellow, a cooler blue, a warmer blue, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's how I speak when it comes to colors. It's just easier for me. Okay, and this is a basic example just to get everybody warmed up here. We know left side is warm, right side is cold. Okay, when these colors stand alone, that's what they are. Okay, now as we go on and go forward with our learning of color theory and the basics here, we'll start to understand that colors will start to shift from warm to cool depending on the environment that they're in. And that's where temperature comes in, because you can have a green with a blue and maybe a purple. And now those are all registered as cooler colors on the spectrum when you look at it as a whole. But when you start to break it down as just a palette, you'll start to see that some colors are leaning now towards the warm and now leaning towards the cold, depending on what situation they're in. And that's when color temperature really starts to get confusing. And I talked about chroma last week, which is that middle ground section of our color wheel. That's this middle ground section. Okay, this is where the act of toning down the intensity of a color, be it using gray or it's complementary, okay, and desaturating a color, the act of, that's what last week was discussing about. So if we have these colors here that are a little bit muted, less muted, except for the bottom right hand side, we start to see now, even though I just called green a cool, we now have a warm version and a cool version of that green. So let's take that away for a second. So we see that here, right? Well, how can that be? Well, let's color select it here. So you see on our right hand side, okay, you see your hue wheel. What is that hue wheel showing? It's showing that this outside is kind of leaning towards a cooler green, okay? And even though green is most of the time a cooler color when it comes to the color wheel by itself, now when placing it in an environment, you can now have a warm and cool green, okay? So as we see, once again, we see that cooler green showing its face towards the bluer section of the family and its heightened saturation. Now, if I go to that warmer green, what is it showing? That green is now on the border of yellow And even though it's very muted, it still shows that it's green, okay? And we talked about what was called the local color of a subject or composition. And your local color, as a simple explanation, would be if I were holding up an apple and asked you what color that was, you're going to say it's red. That's what local color is. It's the first instant color that you see, which for an apple would be red, a pumpkin would be orange, grass would be green, and so on and so forth, okay? So even though this color is bordering yellow, it's still green. So in the same instance that this color is bordering blue, but it is still green, okay? So how do we define that? Well, we define it as a warmer green and a cooler green. And I hope that makes some sense, okay? And I know I'm kind of flying through this portion of it, okay? I just want everybody to really understand the pure basics of it, which I think everybody does. But I'm not assuming, I'm just guessing, because we know the common sense factors of the way that we've been defining these colors for the past couple of weeks. So let's do the same thing here, right? And I'm looking at these two colors together and separate, okay? So let's just say you have a palette, right? It only has these two colors in it. Obviously this orange is warm, right? Because it's leaning towards the warmer side of orange. Well, how does that make sense when orange is warm already? Well, once again, if we kick that wheel over a little bit till we border yellow, right? So that's a border of yellow. We can actually go a little bit more into the oranges. Right, so that would be like a cooler orange, and then of course this would be an even warmer orange. Okay, so this is how, even though altogether they are warm colors, it's still the proper term of explanation between the two hues. Okay, once again, how is this color posed as a cool when it's pretty warm? Now, not only, once again, is it a cooler red, because a warmer red would be here. Then that cooler red would be almost into the pinks, right? Okay. And then if we looked at this palette together, which color would be the cooler color? This one. It would definitely not be the orange. That is warmer than this magenta-y color or cooler red. Okay. And if this still is not making sense to you, I've extended an olive branch. Here we have a word problem, right? In order to get a cooler red, what needs to happen is this red now needs, and you're attentive to the right-hand side, this color now needs to shift into the cools, okay? And what makes a cool as cool gets? Blue, okay? So we need a cooler color to make this magenta-y color. So we're gonna take, obviously, a bluish, purplish color, mix it in with that red, and now we have a cooler red. It is still of the red family, okay? Or purple, I should say. But it is a cooler red. That is how we're going to start, and I'm going to start teaching you guys to define your colors. Not so much red, purple, magenta, green. I want everybody to start going cool red, warm red, cool yellow, warm yellow, cool green, warm green, as far as defining what color they see or hue they're trying to define. That is the goal, because it is very much true in a sense, and even for tattooing with different pigment companies, especially with the amount of pigment companies that are out there, one person's lipstick red is completely different than another person's lipstick red. You may not think so, but even a slight change in temperature matters. So that way, when you go up to another artist and you say, hey man, I need like a red, and they're like, okay, well, what kind of red? And if you go, I need like a warmer red, really saturated, probably value of like 6. Okay, they're gonna pull you out a more warmer red, right? Value of 6. Let's see if I can get this. Okay, be a little bit warmer than that. It's a better communication factor between you and other artists. Okay, and that's what my goal is, right? My goal here is for everybody to be able to communicate with each other better in a more fluid manner, so that way we can grow and learn together as artists in a much more fashionable way with our own language. Because that's what I only ask for in my career, is to pretty much sit with a bunch of other artists that I've looked up to for many years and be able to communicate with them in the craft that I do and learn things from it and have them understand exactly what I'm trying to say. And this is how you do that. You learn the language of the art, okay, which starts from the basic fundamentals. Okay. And that's pretty much describing exactly what I said here. The red is tugged to that cool, making it a cooler red. All right, so I took an image from the interwebs, and I pretty much separated my light and my shadow family. Okay, and it is a vast popular rule that warmer colors fall in front and cooler colors fall in back. Now, why is that? Well, when we see compositions out in life, be it outside, okay, which is where I get a lot of my examples. When we see this happen, we see what being our light source. This is a very easy answer. What is the main light source of life? The sun. The sun is the big flashlight in the sky that is beaming down on all that is life, okay? And so if warm is in front, what has to be in the back? Cools, or the reflection of the sky, which is what color? Blue. So I have it set up here. Light sources are bullies. Now, what could that possibly mean? Well, when the sun is beaming upon the landscape here, as you can tell on the bottom left-hand side of our light family, what your light source wants to do is bully all that it shines on to come towards its hue as much as possible. So it wants to take the color of this grass and make it as yellow as possible. It wants it to be yellow. It wants to cast its yellow upon the land and make it its own. And what's left? All of our cools. That's what shows our reflection of everything else. All the funner, more muted, grossy colors that we see happen in the shadow, where the conversation and story, like I've told before, talking about Caravaggio, all that happens in the light. So when we talk about color temperature and we talk about that very first definition, let's go back to it. That very first definition, let's say it again. Temperature refers to the warmth or coolness of a color. We already know that. A color's temperature affects the color of everything we see. I just explained. And as artists, it's important to learn about it because color temperature helps us create depth, mood, and even movement. Now this definition is starting to make more sense, because when I show something that is happening out in nature every single day that you are witnessing, it now becomes prevalent on how important it is to relay that back into your compositions. To make it more apparent to you that the art and fundamentals of art are not just somebody sitting at a table and be like, this is how it is just because. Because just because is not good enough for me. I need to understand why that is. And if it happens out in natural nature without even trying, then obviously it's for a reason. And we need to respect those rules. Okay? So, with that being said, remember that your light source, whatever color your light source is trying to bully your composition to be that same color, which is how it changes your environment. So, we have this sphere here, and I have a very similar palette as that grass, right? So we have a yellow light shining down on this ball. It's trying to make, it's trying to make this ball as yellow as possible because it's trying to bully it to be yellow. It's not yellow, but it wants it to be. So when we talk about in light, make sure I'm on the right layer, which is anything within this realm, obviously. We see that transitions start to happen, which is what we talked about before. That transition between light to, or warm to cold. So we start off with our main light source here, okay, which is going to be a border between yellow and green. And I exaggerated the palette just for example purposes, okay? Then we start to travel and travel and travel. And I want you to pay attention once again to the palette that is happening. Are you witnessing it? The same exact thing that I was doing last week on how a bridge needs to be built between your yellows to your colds. Okay. And we'll get into color of light source in a second. So don't focus on the light source and that color of the light source. Focus on the ball and the way the palette shifts once the light hits it. Okay, and I got rid of the red just to make it less confusing. So once again, we have our light source, and pay attention to not only the hue wheel, but the chroma in the middle, the journey that this is taking across the board. So you see how it makes sense? That even though, once again, my yellow is leaning towards the coolers, as a whole, that light is warm. Compared to that blue, that is the shadow. Now, why is that shadow blue? Not only is it a complementary to my yellow, so it's going to work, but it's catching its light from its environment. And that environment being what is left outside of that big yellow flashlight that's in the sky is blue. Okay. So this is the Kelvin color temperature chart. Okay, this is the most common color temperatures. I should say more what your light source color is going to be. Okay, so we have candlelight, which is red, extra warm white, could be like a campfire or something like that. Okay, we have warm white. That could be like, if like myself, if you have a very yellow light bulb. Cool white, which is very similar to daylight, but as you can see here, and my secret is going to be revealed right now, so take this into account. What is the color of daylight, everybody? Let's slap that in here. What is our color of daylight? And if you've been following me, you know very well I use this color all the time. What color is daylight? It's teal. Okay? This is the most common color that is used, the most common color we see. This is what our light source is the majority of the time when it is daylight out. Then we have overcast sky. Some nice sky blue. And then we have blue sky, which is obviously blue sky. But this is a breakdown of our natural light sources. Now, there are light bulb charts that have like tungsten bulbs, bluer bulbs, studio bulbs. So there's different levels of having different colored light sources, but this is the basics. This is once again what you'll see out in nature naturally. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. Okay. So I have this here. And gosh, Kier, I thought you were an artist. What is this? Well, remember when I said that we were going to start speaking in kindergarten terms today? Oh, I was pretty serious about that. So this here is an image and drawing that every single kindergartner across the land can make. Okay. This is what it is. You got a tree. This is very Crayola-like, right? You got a tree trunk, brown, right? You have green for the tree, but they'll probably use the same green for the ground. And then you have your blue sky, and then you have your sun. Okay, you've seen this on every kindergartner's page of their family. They maybe have like a house or something, and maybe like their family outside, you know, all that fun stuff. So what we're going to do is display our temperature evenly across the board, as I have explained it in the past couple slides. Let me just take a sip of my drink. Okay. First, I'm going to confuse you. What in God's name is this? Well, this is how light travels. And the colors you are witnessing are the colors that are bouncing around because of that light source. You're getting light from the reflection of the grass. You're getting light from the sun. You're getting light from the reflection of the sky. You're getting reflection off of the leaves. It's bouncing everywhere, left and right, forward and backwards. It's everywhere. So how can you define this? Well, you have to stay simplistic. Break it down. Start with the basic fundamentals of it. So let's put in this here. Okay? I'm gonna let you look at this, and then we're gonna recreate it. Now this is now too past kindergarten level. A kindergartner could not do this because now there's so much thought into this. And it's not supposed to be a good composition. What you're looking at is the colors and the way that they're used as far as temperature goes. Okay? So let's recreate that. Okay, so what did we do? Well, let's focus on the first thing. Okay, first thing first, this is our light source, right? The sun. It's yellow. We know this. The sun is going to want to do what? Bully these leaves into being the same color as the sun as much as possible. So what we're going to do, we're going to color select this, right? And it's already kind of leaning towards warm. It's like borderline neutral green. But for example purposes, what we're going to do is on our outer side, we're going to kick it to the warms a little bit. Not crazy, but a little bit. Kick it to the warms. And we're pretty much going to up the saturation just a little bit. Turn down my opacity here. And we're gonna scumble in. Right, and I'm not worried about my blending right now. I'm just focusing on the way I'm distributing my colors here. Okay, so there's step one, right? Now my bully is trying to change my trunk color, okay, because it's pointing down here now. And it's going to point down here. It's going to want to hit as much as possible and change as much as possible. So for example purposes here, let's take this same green and let's change the grass. Let's just do that, shall we? Let's put some grass color, little specks in here, right? Okay. We're already on our way. Now, we're going to do the same to the trunk. For the trunk, it's more, once again, it's at like an orange, a warmer orange. And like how I did before, what are we going to do? We're going to start kicking that to the warms. But first, before we do that, we're going to change our value. We're going to up our value just a little bit. Kick it over to the warms. And we're going to display that down. Okay. All right. So we're already starting to see our composition change with the effectiveness of our light source and the temperature that it is. Okay, and now we're going to focus on our shadows, right? So once again, this is supposed to be sloppily done. We're not focusing on blending. But where is our shadow going to get its light from? If, and I've explained this many times, if we have our terminator line, and our terminator line is that barrier between our light family and our dark family, and what does that mean? That means that our light source cannot hit that shadow. So what is our shadow being illuminated by? And I've said it already. The sky. So we're going to kick it, this green, over to these coolers because the sky is blue. So the sky is going to want to manipulate it to be blue. But first, before we do that, we're going to change our value. Then we're going to kick it over. And we're going to scumble it in. Right up to our fence line. And this is to show that everybody can do this. This isn't supposed to be like some mad scientist stuff. This is just to prove what is already in existence out in the world. Now, what we can do now is take our local color, because now we're not really focusing on a local color. Our local color is still green for this tree, but it has its warm green, cool green effect to it. So we're going to take our local color, which is down on this grass bottom here, and I'm just going to scumble it into this edge. And that becomes our what? Mid-tone. Okay? And then you can even color select the sun. Give it its little effect here. Kind of just go back and forth with it. Okay? So you're kind of starting to see what happens, right? Once again, for the trunk. Now this trunk needs to be kicked to the warmer or the cooler side. And this is the tricky part. When you're trying to get a much warmer color to the cooler side, you now have to choose which direction it's going to go in. How am I going to get this orange over to that blue as fast as possible? Okay, without taking so many routes. Now, for example purposes, we see here that this orange obviously is here. If we went this way, that just seems a little bit too long of a journey. Okay. Instead, it's already leaning towards this side, so we can just go take this route, and it's much easier than going all the way around. Does that make sense? So when we're choosing our shadow colors, we're deciding, well, okay, where is my shadow going to be illuminated from? And how is it going to take that journey as fast as possible and get there as smoothly as possible? We're going to kick it towards this side. Okay. Kick it, kick it, kick it, kick it. It's going to tug it to the cools as much as possible. And kick it in. Bring my opacity down a little bit. We're just gonna lightly put it in. Maybe mute it down just a tad. Okay. So you're starting to see how it's starting to kind of sort of lean over to a side that makes sense, right? Okay. And we're going to do the same thing with even though we just did pull these shadows in, we can do the same thing and put our reflected light in. Color value this, put it in. And now is an important time to mention that when you're using a dark accent, be it an ambient occlusion or whatever, it's always of warm tones, okay? Because those warm tones are going to start to kick in front. So you want that dark to stand out. Don't want it to be so subtle. So that's what we're doing here. Okay, so once again, we can take this dark shadow, make some sort of cast in it, and then remember that you can color select it, that this is being illuminated by the sky. So it's going to have a bluish tinge to its environment. Okay. Now, once again, this is too extreme for a child now, because now this has thought to it. This has a plan of action. This has, its colors have its place of value. Okay. So let's take that out for a second. Let's bring this one back. So they're quite similar. And this exercise can be done any way, shape, or form. Okay. Of any skill level. I just taught you how to do it yourself, and now you can go off and do it. It's a good way to practice. It's a good way how to display your color theory in the best motion. So, last and final here. This is an important, very, very important statement here. The majority of vibrant colors happen in the shadow. Now, why is that? That is because in the lights, it is too focused on what color that light source is. Whereas in the shadow, I could get away with putting blue in here. Why can I get away with it? Because it's being reflected by everything else in its environment. The shadows are illuminated by everything else. I could even put green in here if I felt like it. Why? Because of the reflection of the grass. Now we're moving towards like an unrealistic, tree in a sense, but furthermore being that if you wanted to use more quote unquote saturated tones, vibrant colors, do so in the shadows. Have your light section be merely focused on what that light source is and how much of a bully that light source is. That's the whole point. Caravaggio did it very well. He understood that the story was told in light. Okay? And that's an important factor. So now that we've done that exercise together, okay, this was my other example of reflected light here, and how it is illuminated by everything else. Okay, let's study some artists. So this is something that I did a couple years ago, and this is when I was really starting to figure out color theory. This was one of my first ever successful color theory studies. Okay. Do you see what color this light source is? It's like green. It's like a yellowy, warm green. Okay. Or cooler yellow. Okay. So we're going to witness the journey it's going to take. So you see how, don't look at the hue side, look at the middle ground. Okay, do you see? Both what is happening now in the middle section and the back section. It starts from one end of the spectrum and brings it over to the other in a fluid motion that makes sense. And I got away with having my light source be green because of its complementary color being down there, complementary color being red. So even to the eye, it looks like whitish yellow because the use of chroma. Me putting down that green canceled out the sight of green due to its complementary color being down there already. So now you're thinking it's like yellowish, whitish, really bright, saturated, vibrant, what have you, okay? Are you starting to understand how colors communicate with each other? They have conversations, they have friends, they have relationships, they have family, they have roads that they go down, journeys they cross, all that fun stuff, okay? Next artist. This is one of my all-time favorite artists. His name is Ratchet Laser on Instagram, if you want to give him a follow. But this is Mattriscoll. Now, Mattriscoll is the reason why I delved into temperature as hard as I did. Because he paints compositions like this, besides tattooing amazingly, paints compositions like this and uses temperature to the highest regard. Okay? Are we witnessing what's happening here? He has almost a double light source. He has this light source of this ball that's in here. Maybe if I have it. Okay. That's giving some reflection to the outer sides. But he also has another light source that's shining here, here, all in this section. And they're both having the conversations with each other. This is temperature used in the best manner. He has a warm light source and cooler shadows. Best distributed here on one of his other paintings that he did. This is also Mattriscoll or Ratchet Laser on Instagram. I want you to see the conversations that are happening between his colors. So we have, okay, pay attention to the right-hand side. I'll color select for you. Starting with our light source color. Do you see what's happening? And this is something new that I haven't quite taught yet. And he's using a different module or a different way of communication with his colors. So his first set or his light source colors are in their own section. So he has his light source or his bully coming in, and they're kind of appearing in the same sections here, as you can see. Like they're very much together. They're almost going in like a Z formation, where mine goes straight across the board. As you can see, his are back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Okay, so that's how his lights interact with each other. Now his shadows, okay, so although those inner eye sockets are being read as warm, they are starting to lean towards the cooler side of the family. So if he wants to make that transition into the cooler sides, he can do so effectively. But as you can see now, his shadows are appearing almost in the opposite end of the spectrum, but yet they're still in the same zigzag lined formation, going from saturated to chromate to saturated to chromate. Okay, and he's even using the same rule of thumb, which is any dark accents are of the warm tone. It is the exact middle line between his lights and his cools here. Okay, he's using all the color theory knowledge of fundamental aspects. He's using complementary colors. He's using those purples, those yellows, those blues, and those oranges together, those are the complementaries. He's using green and red together. But what's most important that I want to bring up in this is the way that he's distributing his light source. He understands that he's having a yellow light source come down and hit the top of that skull, yet he's having the reflected blanket show up at the top. So the environment makes sense. Whether it's sitting on like a blanket or something like that, it makes sense. Because he knows that as that light source is coming down, it is also going to bounce off that blanket or sheet or whatever that is and bounce back up at that skull, which is creating what you are seeing. So here's one other example here that he did. Okay, so this is one of his tattoos, obviously. Mattriscoll, Ratchet Laser, the man. He's doing the same thing. He has a yellow light source that is coming down on top of this skull, yet he's distributing this almost teal-like shadow reflected light on both his skull and the rose that's behind to make the environment come together. And that's what's important here. Not only is he using the same theory within his art, but he's also doing it within his tattoos as well. Because once again, what was that one light source color that I said was important through all of this? Daylight. Daylight's the most common one, which is that teal-esque color, and he's using it effectively as reflected light. And he's using that sun flashlight color as the top tone for his skull. And I just want to peer out just so everybody can kind of take a look at this. And this is the use of temperature in its effective ways. Okay. So this is very, very, very important. And this is why I'm teaching this. Not only so you can have different terms and stuff like that for your art theory and your compositions outside of tattooing, but to see that it could also be used finitely and smartly in tattooing as well, with whatever composition you want to do, and to make color theory and let you know that color theory is not scary. Everybody always gets terrified of color theory all the time, and it's not terrifying, I promise you. So I have the teal highlighted there. Okay. So once again, let's go back to the beginning definition. Temperature refers to the warmth or coolness of a color. The color's temperature affects the color of everything we see. And as artists, it's important to learn about it because color temperature helps us create depth, mood, and even movement. Quite fascinating. I guarantee you that all of you understand exactly what this says now, word for word. And understands why it's important and the moods it creates, the movements, the depths, and especially distributing those warmth and cools appropriately. And this way it helps you pick a palette much easier as well. Okay, so that was what I had for you guys today. This was your introduction to color temperature and the understanding between warmth and cools. And we, I think, are right on time. And usually I will have everybody join on and we'll do an assignment together. Unfortunately, I do have other obligations outside of here, so I do have to cut it right where we are now. And I just want to let everybody know that if you guys have any questions at all, let me go back on the Zoom here. If you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to let me know. You can give me a holler on the Instagrams at Frankie Says Things, or you can let me know on Reinventing the Tattoo, which is Frankie Tattoos Things. I'd love to hear everybody's comments, questions, and concerns about things. This was a very big topic to go on, and this was a very big subject to really delve into, and I tried really hard to really get as much information as I could into your brains without overwhelming you at all. So, you know, feel free if you do have any questions at all, please let me know. I'd love to answer them. I can give you, if anybody wants to continue to learn the warm versus cool temperatures, I can send you some seminars and stuff that I've learned my information from, and who actually taught me that tree example. So with that, I think next week is Thanksgiving. So I mean, I'll do a class, but I don't think I'm not gonna have anybody obligated to come on. But it is, when I believe will be, let me check the calendar here, will be our last week of color theory. And I really would like you guys to let me know what you guys would want to see and learn from me. If we want to continue the color theory train, or if we want to talk about something else, you guys can let me know if anything. I did a lot of topics these past couple months. We've been chugging through the fundamentals. So I think we may start to delve into more advanced things more serious topics, compositionally. We may continue with the color theory thing. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. So feel free to comment down below, send me a message. And I was happy that my internet did not wank out today. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for joining me. Shout out to Reinventing the Tattoo, where this is beaming out of. If you'd like to join in on future classes, you do have to have a Reinventing the Tattoo sign on. It is free, so feel free to sign on. You can make some new friends there, post up your artwork, get some helpful advice from others, and learn many things. And with that being said, thank you guys so much for joining on today. It was wonderful hanging out with you guys, and I hope everybody has a good day. Thank you guys so much. Bye.